Hello, this is Omar Ocampo from Broadcom, and this is a quick tutorial to show you how to create a custom trace in APM. So these are the various scenarios that I'm gonna walk you through. Creating a custom tracer for one specific class, how to instrument one method from a class, how to instrument complex method from a class. Complex method are methods that uh, are not just getters and setters, right? Methods that have a bunch of lines within the method, hence complex method. And then how to instrument all methods, regardless of the complexity of the method, of the body of the method. It could be a getter and a setter in this case. Then we're going to go and I'm going to show you how to do one class extending another class or in an interface. Then we're going to do instrumenting many classes, extending either an abstract class, a parent class, or an interface. Uh, then how to instrument many classes under a specific package name, right? So maybe there is a set of classes of all classes under a certain package name that you want to instrument. So I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll show you a quick test result. All right, to that end, so let's talk about probe-builder, right? So APM has a bytecode instrumentation engine, and we create a probe-builder directive to let it know which class we want to instrument, what class and method we want to instrument. Okay, so I want to make sure that we understand the terminology here. So we have a PBD. You'll keep hearing us talk about PBDs and PBLs. So a PBD is a probe-builder-directive file specifying which tracers to add in what classes method. Right. So in this particular one, you can actually specify, call out the class name and the method name that you want to instrument. Now a PBL is just a probe builder list, right? This one is going to have a list of PBDs. So let me show you a quick example of that. Uh, so for instance, this is the agent that you have. In this case, is the latest agent. Just downloaded the latest agent. But all agents, if you look at your structures, will all be the same. And you can see in here that if you look at the uh, Interscope agent profile, let me open it up, and I'll search for PBL. Um, you can see that there is a property in Interscope agent profile called Interscope Autoprobe Directive Files. In here, I'm telling it to read ACC master PBL, okay, in a directory called hot deploy. I'll talk about that hot deploy in a bit later on, but right now you can see that we're actually pointing to a PBL. So, and if I take a look at the PBL, ACC master PBL, okay, so remember probe builder list, right? It's just a file composed of many PBDs files, right? And each PBD, as we'll see in a minute, um, it's actually will have a directive on telling the bytecode instrumentation agent what class method to instrument. All right. So good. I just wanted to get that out of the way. The next thing I want to cover is constructing custom tracers. Uh, Custom tracers should be saved in a separate directive file. So, you shouldn't add your custom tracer to an existing PBD. You should create a new PBD. It's best practices. There's specific syntax and keywords that we have to use, and we'll cover that. This is the point of this tutorial. And the other thing that you need to be aware of is that whenever you instrument, obviously you're adding overhead to your application, right? So you got to be careful what methods you instrument. You don't want to instrument a method, for instance, that gets executed many times, right? Because every time the method executes with our probe, right, with a bytecode instrumentation in that method, it will incur some overhead. So imagine you have a method that actually, it's got a loop, and that loop calls, let's say, another method, some other classes method, right, within the loop, and you loop in, I don't know, say 10,000 times. Now, if you were to instrument, right, that method that's being called within the loop, right, you'll execute, the bytecode instrumentation or probe 10,000 times within a matter of milliseconds. And so that's going to incur a huge overhead, on your application. So the best practices is you want, especially for production, you want to instrument uh, the classes that, classes that are front ends, classes that receive, that are capturing the incoming request. For instance, a servlet, right, will capture a HTTP request. A JMS will capture a message. Uh, Web services, uh, Kafka, same thing, right? If you capture, monitor the Kafka consumer, you'll see actually uh, you're instrumenting the class, the method that's actually dealing with a request coming in. Similarly, you want to capture backends, anything that calls out. And the reason why you want to do this, notice when I say call out, backend calls databases, right, a different system, and so on and so forth. So when you actually instrument those classes are actually are doing I/O, right? They're doing I/O calls, either receiving right from outside of the JVM or sending out. And when you instrument these classes that have IO calls in them, then the overhead that we incur is very minuscule. You won't even notice, right? So this is one of the things that you want to think about in production. Now, if you're in test, if you're testing and you want to understand, what classes are being called, what is the flow, and so on and so forth, then that you can instrument, all classes, and this is what we're going to do in here, right? So what I'm teaching you in here, what I'm going to show you, how to instrument, many classes and various packages and so on and so forth, is for testing purposes, for you to discover, right, the flow, what classes, what methods are being executed, right? You would not want to run this in production because it will slow down your server by, let's say, I don't know, 40, 50%, that high. All right. So there's a kosher warning, right? Because I'm really giving you matches here. I'm teaching you how to light a match, right? So you got to be careful. So custom tracers have the syntax, right? So to construct a tracer, and again, this is just a little bit of theory, but we'll jump into an actual example in a minute. You got to provide the directive type, the class and the method that you want to trace, the type of tracer that you want to add, right? Are you interested in monitoring the response time, concurrency, an error, and so on and so forth? And the name of the resulting metric. Where do you want this, when you report this metric, what do you want it to be? Well, how do you want it to look like? So for instance, here's two examples, right? Here's what directive that we provide directive, and then we follow with a class name, the class name that we're interested, the method in the class name that we're interested, the tracer that we want to use, and the metric. The metric being, what is the output of that metric, right? How is it going to show in the tree? Notice that each pipe is a folder. Okay, so this will be at the root level, right? Right underneath the agent name, you'll see pet store, right? And there'll be a folder under pet store called catalog. There'll be a folder under catalog called search. And then because we're using blame point tracer in this case, you'll get, this is sort of a group of tracers. You'll get the 5 metrics: response time per interval, invocation per interval, how many times that method was called every 15 seconds, um, concurrency, stalls, and errors. Okay, and then we have another flavor of custom tracer syntax, which is directive, just as above, but now a flag name, right? We're not going to use a class name. We're going to create some sort of label, and I'll show you this. This is very flexible. Then same thing, a tracer or method. Right? A method is optional in this case, and you'll see why. Definitely a tracer though. You got to tell me what is it that you want to capture, and what do you want me to report the metric. All right. Okay, so I'll come back to this. So let's go back and let's do this. Let's show you. I'm going to walk you now through the various scenarios that I said I was going to show you. So the first one is instrumenting one class. So the simplest way to instrument one class is using this directive, right? which is a directive called trace one method of class, okay? And now I'm going to specify the class itself. So I have an example. I have a ticket. This is one of our code for one of our sample applications. Uh, but here we're interested in monitoring the account SQL map DAO. And if you notice, here's the package name, and here's the method, and here's the class name. So now I'm saying trace one method of class. Here's the package name, and here's the class name, right? So class name. Now followed by a method. So in here, let's say we're interested in monitoring get account, but notice that get account is a overloaded method, right? So I have one with one input, one parameter, and another method with two parameters. So when I say get account, right, since I'm not specifying, I'm not giving it a signature, I'm not specifying which of those two methods are going to be instrumented, then both of them are going to be instrumented, right? I'm just looking only at the method name, not at the parameters of the method or return value. The next one is the tracer. This is the tracer that typically that we use, the blame point tracer. Uh, and where do you want this to go? So for instance, let me show you what that would look like. So that will be persistence. Let me open this up. Oops, that's not what I want. And I think I don't have it. Let me say it again. I wonder why I did it. I guess it was done. Anyways, so in this case, we said it will be ticket exchange, persistent, the class name and the method. So let's go ahead and let's say get ticket exchange, persistence, and the method name, right? And sorry, and the class name, okay? So there's the class name. And if I open up, followed by the method, okay? That's what it will look like. Now, this is just the simplest way, but it's not very flexible, right? Because I got to do one entry per class and method, right? Since I'm doing trace one method of class, so I got to specify the class name and the method. So if I were interested, for instance, let's go back in here and instrument a get username list, I will cut and paste this line and say get user list. Okay. Now the second way is using the flag or the label, right? This one is composed of two steps, right? The first thing you need to do is actually define what the flag name is, right? The label that you want, right? So what classes do you want to tag? And then followed by the method, just as before, right? The method, the tracer, and the method. So in order to define a flag, these are the two directives that you need to use. Set flag, okay, and you give it a name. You call your flag anything you want. In this case, I call it custom Java classes. You can call it whatever you want. And and then we have the ability to turn on and turn off this. So this becomes a group, right? So I'll come back to this, but right now, right, the main thing you need to do is set up a flag. Okay, so we set the flag, and this is the name of that we're giving it to our flag, our label. Okay, the next thing now, I'm going to say identify class as. Okay, this is a directive, right? And in here, I'm saying identified this class as this label, as this flag. Okay, so this is almost the same as this. All right, and then when I go and actually instrument this, when I actually tell it to instrument the method, I'm going to say trace one method. Uh, I can do trace one method if flagged or trace one method with parameters if flagged. The difference is that if you didn't use with parameters, the tracer that's going to run is not going to get the parameters of the method. In this case, right? If let's say if I were to use trace one method, if flag means if the flag is turned on, okay? If flagged, then right. So that means that this when I instrument this get account, I'm not going to get uh, these parameters. I'm not going to have access to these, nor I'm going to have access to the return value or to an exception thrown. So if you're interested, maybe you're not interested so much on the parameters being passed in, but you definitely are interested on a method if it throws an exception, right? Or maybe the return value, but most likely the exception. You want to know if if an exception was thrown in that method. If you want to do that, then you have to use this directive. Trace one method with parameters if flagged. Now, we'll follow the flag name. In this case, since I'm saying one method, I got to specify the method, the tracer, blame point tracer, and again, same thing, right? The metric, the resource name, where do I want this to go? This case, ticket exchange, persistent, class name, and method, right? And as you notice, this is going to be followed, if I open this up, by these 5 metrics that we talked about. Average response time, concurrency invocation, errors per interval, responses per interval, and stall. Now, um, so even though I say blame point tracer, so this is something that you need to be aware of. Even though I say blame point tracer, okay, it's got 5 metrics, oops, and I showed it to you in here, this error per interval is a placeholder. So there's you never this is not going to capture any error. If you want to capture an error on this class, then you have to enter another line and use a different tracer, something called, you can use this exception error reporter. Okay. Now, and I missed something here, right? I missed it. All right. So I missed the method name, right? Because I'm tracing one method. So trace one method of this class, right? Or, if flagged, where this flag matches this class, for this method, I want to run this tracer, exception error reporter, and I want it to report under ticket exchange persistence class name method. But notice that now I have a column and I have errors per interval. Okay, which you don't do that with a blame point tracer, but you do it with this guy. Um, don't want to go too much into detail. I'll be more than happy to answer questions afterward, but that's just the syntax. That's just how it works. Okay. So again, if I were to do trace one method if flagged, right, with parameters, then this will work. Right? I'll get the account and I get the blame point tracer and I'll get all those 5 metrics, but I'm never going to get an error, right? Because there's no, first of all, because blame point tracer does not um, report errors, right? It's just a placeholder. And second of all, even if I were to do this, let me do it for you. Let's say I were to do this. So just so that looks even. And I'll say this, right? Trace one method of flagged. Here's the flag. Here's the method. Here's the tracer now, right? Uh, so this is not going to be able to capture the tracer because since you don't have with parameters, this tracer is never going to get the exception. If an exception is thrown, it's never going to get that object. Okay, so just remember that. Um, all right, so now this is just for trace only one method. Let's say we wanted to trace more than one method, right? So as I said, we have the ability to say complex methods and all methods. For complex methods, it's just that the director is going to be trace complex methods if flagged, right? So again, so here's the flag, here's the tracer, and here's what's going. Notice that I don't have to put a method name in here because I'm saying complex methods, right? This directive is just gonna evaluate, it's gonna look at all the methods of that class, right? Of this flag class, in this case, this guy, and gonna see if they're complex in order to be instrumented. Now, if we take a look at these guys, so most of these guys are complex, right? So usually uh, what we skip with complex is getters and setters. Now, if you wanted to, monitor all of them regardless, right? Then we use trace all method. Oh, by the way, notice that because I'm doing an exception, I'm also, for complex methods, I also want to capture if any of the complex method that we're instrumenting throws an error. I want to report an error. I want to make sure that we report errors. Um, I'm using trace complex method with parameters. Okay. So this is going to apply to all the complex methods within this method. Now, if I were interested in doing all methods, then I would say trace all methods if flagged, right? So here's the flag, here's the tracer, and this is where the metric is going. I don't need to put a method again because I'm doing all methods. However, notice that one thing to keep in mind with trace all methods, they don't have with parameters. So you don't have the ability to capture trace all with parameters. Okay? You can do with parameters for trace one method or trace complex method. So in other words, if you're interested in capturing errors, then trace all method is not the right directive for you. Okay? You'll have to use this one, or if you're interested in a single method, this one. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now let's move on to the second scenario where we say instrument one class extending another class or interface. So this is where this flag comes in, right? Because remember, we flag this to be identify class as to be this class, but I can also, right, use the same flag to say, oh, this also represents, right, also instrument, right, also capture this, right, any class, right, that inherits from this one, base SQL map DAO. So take a look at this. Let's say, so we have this account SQL map DAO, which we instrumented uh, by saying identify class as or saying trace one method of class, right? By actually capturing that class on a flag or just putting the name itself, the class name itself. But now if I look at this, this is persistence. Persistence have many of them, and I can open up a different one. And this one also extends base map DAO, just like account SQL map DAO does. Well, I could obviously go in here, do this one, right, and say identify class as, instead of account SQL, in addition to this, add this class, right? If I'm interested on this one, item SQL map DAO, right? But I noticed that they both, right? In fact, all of these guys extends base SQL DAO. So if I were interested in monitoring these classes, I would say uh, identify, right, classes that inherit from base SQL DAO. So any class that extends or implements it. This could have been an interface, by the way, right? So this is the same directive for both abstracts, parent classes, abstract classes, parent classes, or interfaces, right? So that means that you either extend or implement this base SQL map DAO, then any class, those classes that do extend or implement this one will actually be instrumented. Okay, so this is how you instrument one class extending another class, right? So obviously you're going to get more than one class in this case, right? So this directive, identify inherited as, will actually instrument all these classes in here, right? Because they all extend base SQL map DAO. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And now once again, now that you have uh, now that you have specified the flag name, right? You determine if you want to instrument one method or or complex method or all methods. So you notice that the trace one method, trace complex method, and trace all methods are going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change in here is your flag name, right? How many classes are we capturing here, right? Is it one class? Is it all classes that inherit from this? Or is it many classes, okay, that that are extending uh, the, the flag name. So let me give you an example for this. So we're going to go ahead and go to SQL. I want to give you this one. So this one, let's say, now here's a perfect one. So we're going to do, this is our out of the box SQL agent PBD. This is how we instrument all the JDBC calls and the SQL calls and so on and so forth. So notice in here, right? So we're going to instrument statement configuration. So we're saying, here's the flag name. So in, somewhere in here, there should be a set flag called SQL agent statement. We can find it, but believe me, it's there. Actually, you know what? Don't believe me. Let's do it. So if I go, oh, it could have been defined somewhere else as well, to be honest. Um, it doesn't matter on which file you define, because one of the things that the bytecode instrumentation agent does, it reads all the PBDs. So it doesn't read one or the other, it reads all, and it becomes sort of a long list. So you can have defined, you can turn on uh, these flags on a different file if you want, because just think of them, all of them concatenate into a one very long file once it gets read by the bytecode agent instrumentation. Anyway, so we'll go back in here. So here's the flag, and now I'm saying, okay, I want you to instrument anything that extends, inherits from this, or implements this. Similarly, I want you, I'm going to use the same flag name to say, hey, also, if anything inherits from or implements prepare statement, or extends or implement callable statement, or, you see, I'm capturing a lot of conditions on this flag. So in this case, Sybase, Comto Sybase, Oracle, Oracle JDBC, WebLogic, and so on and so forth, right? Every statement that we know out there, anything that extends these known uh, interfaces, abstract classes, whatever they may be, we want to capture them. We're gonna monitor them, right? We're gonna put them into our flag name. Now, what happens, you may ask, if, let's say you're not running WebLogic, you're running, I don't know, Tomcat or something else, then that's okay, right? I'm never going to match it, right? So there's never going to be a WebLogic.jdbc, MySQL, and that JVM. So nothing happens. It just gets ignored, okay? There's no match. So there's no harm in adding more, right? And adding all this. Now, so this is the idea, right? So now, uh, obviously, let me see this one. I don't just have to do, I can do anything I want, right? So notice this, that I can mix and match. I can, in this one, for instance, I can say, you know what, monitor or instrument anything that inherits a Java SQL connection, as well as anything that inherits Sybase connection, or an actual class, right? So here I'm actually dictating or explicitly naming the class name. I'm not saying inherit, but here's the class name. I happen to know the class name, so I'm actually putting it in there. So think of this as a group. So these flag names, right, will match all these, right? All classes that inherit this, all classes that match this, and so on and so forth. So when a class gets loaded, right, this is going to be applied, and it's going to see if there is a match on that class. If there is a match on that class, then we'll go ahead and then we'll look at this directive. What do you want to do with that, right? Do you want to instrument one method? Do you want to instrument complex method, or do you want to instrument all methods? Okay, hopefully this makes sense. And just wanted to show you, if we continue with this, let's follow this. Copy FA. So there's turn on, so they're turning on. So this is enabling. So let's say you didn't want SQL agent statement to be turned on, so you simply comment this out. If you comment this out, then this is not going to take effect, because if the flag is not turned on, then it will be false, right? When you say F flag, it will be false. It's not true, so it's not going to happen. This is not going to happen. So if you do want it to be, uh, if you do want to monitor it, so you have to turn it on. Okay, so as we said before, you're gonna set the flag, tell me what the flag name is, and then somewhere, right, you can do it right up below, whatever you want. You're either gonna turn it on or just comment that out, or don't say anything, right? By default, flags are turned off, right? So you have to explicitly turn it on. All right, let's go back to this. Uh, and now notice, right? So notice the different methods, right? So again, remember, these guys are instrumenting a lot of classes, right? From WebLogic, from Sybase, and so on and so forth. Now, some of these classes, right, from the various application vendors may not execute, let's say, execute batch, right? And that's okay, right? Because if we don't match it, nothing happens, right? If we do match it, we're going to instrument it. But if we found the class and then we're looking for that method name and the method name doesn't happen to exist on that class, uh, then we don't bother with it, right? We don't instrument it. And now, but okay, good. So I just wanted to explain that. The other thing that I wanted to show you, in this case, notice what they do. They're not saying execute update because maybe execute update is overloaded method. And so they're actually going other way and putting the signature of the method that they want to instrument. So let's take a look at our example. So we have two get accounts, right? Get account username and get account with username and password. Let's say that we're interested in instrumented get account with username and password. Okay, not this one, but this one. Or maybe both, but we want the output, the resource, the metric. Remember the resource metric name where the metric is going to be displayed. Maybe we want them to be differently, right? On different folders, right? This could be uh, get account one parameter. This will be get account two parameters. So if you wanted to distinguish between the performance of each one of them. So for that, yeah, so I captured that example. So here's the public account. So this is the get account, two parameters, and returns an account. So you would say trace one method with parameter. Here's my flag, right? Here's the one method, right? The method that I'm interested in. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do a signature, method signature on complex because you don't even specify the method name. Everything's just going to be captured. But on the one method, I have the option to specify the signature of the method. So now this is where this comes in. The last page. I capture this so you can see uh, the types and the signature, the symbols, the operands that you want to use. So for instance, remember we said that the parameters were toString, username and password. So this is a class instance. It starts with an L, followed by the class name, and ends with a semicolon. Okay, so if I go here, so here's one parameter, L, Java /lang/string, followed by a second parameter. Notice there's no comma or anything, right? It's just one after the other. And the return is done at the end. And this method, right, in order to match, right, I need to match also the return. And the return is another object. Let's make sure that we take a look at it. And this is the return, right? Account. So if I were to look at account, it's just this is what I want. Yep. Um, ticker exchange domain account. That's the object that I'm returning. And so L com/ticker exchange/domain /account semicolon. Okay. So this will be my method with signature, followed by the tracer as before, and followed by the metric where I want this to report. All right. Now we'll go to the last one, right? The more powerful one and the most dangerous one too. Instrumenting many classes, one or many classes for a specific package name, right? So for that one, we're going to use the directed gold identify matching classes as. I created a new flag. This flag now is called Jet Ticket Exchange All Services. And now I'm saying, and you can, let me show you in here, right? So I have, let me close this, and let me open one class in here. So this one is, the package is com.jetticketexchange.service, right? This is the package, and all these classes, right, are under this package. So I want to instrument all of them, right? And so maybe, uh, and again, there could be another package underneath service and classes underneath that package, and they will also be included, okay, in here in this flag name. Okay, so this is just a wildcard. All right, so here's a note: identifying matching classes requires quotes around the package specifier. So you got to put quotes this time. Notice that none of the above have quotes, but this ones do. Okay, keep that in mind. And now when we do, we just say again, right? So we're capturing everything under services, right? All the classes that, and since it's a wildcard, right? Everything below services package. Uh, and I'm saying trace complex method, right? Trace all complex method for all classes, right? Found under services dot wildcard. I want to use blame point tracer, and I want it to go to Jetic Exchange service class name method. And again, this is what it looks like. So services, um, and now in this case, I only have catalog service. And you can see under catalog, I capture all the complex methods, okay, and the five methods underneath them. Now, if there was a particular class that you wanted to skip, then you can use this skip package prefix for flag, right? So let's say that we were interested in uh, this one, Ad, admin service. We don't want to instrument this guy, right? For whatever X reason, we don't need it. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell actually that will be uncommon, right? So you would uncommon this, and you would use skip package prefix for flag. Tell me the class name that you want to skip, and the flag name. And similarly, if you wanted to skip a whole package now, you would do, let's say that services had a .io package, right? And there were a lot of other maybe classes or packages under IO. You would just simply say skip package. And so services.io package and everything underneath it will be skipped, will not be instrumented. Okay? So this takes precedence. As you know, you can actually use one of these guys, trace one method and actually name out, right? Call out the service.io.class name. But, right, since remember, it's a single file. Once it sees a skip, it will skip that, right? And it will ignore any traces that you may have created against that particular class. All right, let's take a look at ticket exchange. So again, so what I'm going to do, so I'm going to show you, oops, so what I want, here's the packages, here's their application, and I want to instrument. I'm interested in understanding some of these classes, and I have an example why I want to do this. So the next slide, okay. So I instrument, and let me show you what this looks like. So this is ticket exchange, okay. So when you go to Concert, you click in here, and you run into an error. Okay. Now, when I instrument the ticket exchange with APM out of the box, no custom tracers, and that error occurs, this is what I get. Right? I get an error. Okay, it identifies it. Right? And it tells me that this is actually a servlet. and it tells me that the root cause, what's causing this error is coming from here, and it's a servlet item. Okay, let me see. Can I have it? Maybe I can go down a little bit. Okay, so I wanted to see if I could see. Uh, no, I cannot. Anyways, so it just tells me that this is the class you can see, and then underneath is a servlet item JSP, and the error message is actually tag not defined or something like that, right? Not useful. It doesn't. I don't know what that means. It's not helping me, right? And you notice all GNDI servlet, and then it's calling Apache Catalina connector, so on and so forth. Now, so in order for me to understand better where this error is coming from within my code, I'm going to go ahead and create my own custom tracers, right? So I'm going to create a file called Ticket Exchange PBD. That's the name of my app, and I'm going to say I'm interested in monitoring the persistence, all classes that exist under the persistent package. And what I want to do, I'm setting up a flag called Jet Ticket Exchange Persistent All. Okay, and this persistence all is going to um, be the flag name for the identify matching class, which means this is going to represent all the classes, right, that exist under persistence. Once I do that, then I'm going to go ahead and say, now I want you to instrument the complex method for these guys, right? Blame point tracer, and I want them to be reported under ticket exchange persistent class name method. Similarly, right, I want to instrument the same classes, same methods, but with exception error reporter, right? So I can get an error from it. Now, same thing, I want to do that for services, right? For my services package, right? Same idea, right? And my presentation package. So I have persistent services and presentation. This is a very simple app. You can see that I have persistence. So these are my persistent classes. Uh, Presentation and services, I believe it was. So all these, okay? So I'm monitoring all those and I'm monitoring anything that is complex. Then I have one specific one. So I'm interested on this Apache Common HTTP client. Somehow this is not being picked up out of the box in APM, or at least it wasn't when I tested this. And so I'm actually, again, right, I identify this class, okay? And I don't know if this class is actually extended or not, right? So just in case it is extended by a different class, right? I'm going to say, and anything that inherits from this class, right? So you see this pattern is used quite often, right? So instrument this class, and I'll tell you what method I want that class to be instrumented. And just in case that class is actually extended by a different class, I'll add this. Oh, right? And also instrument any other class that might extend the class that I'm interested in. One of the things that I noticed I forgot in here is the method. Um, well, look that after, but so once I have this, uh, I can identify, I can say now trace will be just like this. I'll do it with you, right? Trace complex method. So here's my flag name. Here's the tracer, and I want it to go. Let's make it go into HTTP client. Let's say this is. Let's call it Apache. Something like this, right? Apache, HTTP client, and then the class name, and then the method, right, that I'm instrumenting. And similarly, if I wanted to catch errors, I will do the same thing. Here's the flag. This is the tracer that I want for errors, exception error reporter. And I wanted to go to the same place, but, right, remember, for errors, I have to specify the metric name, error per interval. All right, so save this. And in this particular case, I want to skip something called servlet container. Okay. So now, again, so I'm interested. I don't, let's say, don't really understand. I want to understand the flow, right? I don't have a particular class. Uh, I'm not sure which class is actually is the root cause of that exception that we saw. So this is a test, right? So this is for it's a discovery test. So that's why I'm using a defined matching class for the um, various packages. And so when I deploy this and I run this and I run into the same error, uh, this is what I get this time, right? So remember I got this. Now, if I do that, now I can start seeing some of my own uh, application classes, right? Uh, catalog bean, view item, right? And now I can see that there's an error before that, right? Here's another class of mine. There's a service, right? And now if you look at, oh, that's too bad. Let me see if I can make this smaller. Well, let me see if I can show you. Let's see if if I can actually show it to you. Maybe I'll go the last hour. Let's see if we can do this. We're just trying to, I want to make sure that I don't have any, oh, it just showed up and I refreshed it. Very impatient. Okay, let's try it again. Uh, Click in here. Okay, good. So this one has my classes because this is one of the last ones. Because I really want to show you, right, that this is what we were seeing before, JSP servlet, um, the JNDI calls that we saw. We saw this, right, the servlet, that's all that. But since now I have my own, right, I'm instrumenting my application classes, I can see some of my classes show up. And if I can move this on the side, I can see that this is the class that actually threw an error, right? Ticket exchange, persistence, item SQL, get item. And if I look at the error message, sure enough, right, it tells me that this item is not supported. Okay, so this is the difference. Hopefully, and hopefully this makes sense why sometimes you want to create your own custom tracers, right? Because out of the box, APM doesn't know the name of your package, doesn't know the name of your classes, right? So we only instrument standard interfaces, right? So like the SQL statement I show you, servlets, EGBs, and so on and so forth. Anything that is written by you, by the application development team, uh, we're, we have something called smart instrumentation, right? Which is very good at identifying certain classes, but it's never going to give you exactly the one you want, right? It does a really good job, don't get me wrong, in helping you in identifying some of your own custom classes, but it may or may not pick up, right, this particular one, for instance, in this case, this one. So in order for you to, to make sure that you do instrument this class, that's where you will create a custom tracer to do that. All right. Um, I think that's all there is. But this obviously probably didn't do a lot of justice to it within in the 20 minutes that I talked, but hopefully it will get you on your way. So I'll provide you with this, okay, so that you have an idea of the syntax of what to do and so on and so forth. I'll give you this as well, um, so you can look at this, at the syntax. And this is actually in case you wanted to use signature, you want to identify a particular uh, method, then you take a look at these operands that you'll have to use in order to identify uh, a particular class. Okay, well, that's all there is. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.